country music it's the genre of the working man. It's a genre of stories. It's supposed to be about the American struggle. So to think that it is just a genre about white dudes having parties and tailgates and boats is completely historically inaccurate anyway. And there are people here, and have been people here, making incredible country music that is progressive, that is, all music is political, if you ask me anyway. But if you want to tag it with that is dealing, existing in a political space, reacting to the culture. Some of it is protest music. Some of it is just, singing about modern day struggles of womanhood or queerness or whatever that is. And that to me is some of the most interesting country music being made. It helps us all deal with being human, see the human, seeing each other as humans, and which is a great function of music. So at the same time that I always feel very kind of pessimistic about certain parts of the genre, I feel very hopeful about other parts. As long as we're not talking about country radio, because then it's kind of all out the window. But, yeah.
Welcome back to Choose the Bear. This week we are having a little bit of a double treat. It's Halloween week, and I thought, why not do something special? So today we are talking to the absolutely brilliant Marissa Moss. She is the author of Her Country, this really incredible book about women in country music, featuring some of your faves, some of my faves, Maren Moss, Casey Musgraves, Mickey Guyton. Talking a lot about just women in country music. Marissa is also really well known. She wrote a Rolling Stone story that really was sort of the catalyst for Me Too in country music, and was really exceptional. She's just awesome. She knows so much about music and women in music. It was a really fun conversation. So we are going to talk to her today, and then on Friday for Halloween, look out for a special episode. So see you then. Don't forget to like and subscribe, where the buttons are. And of course, all of the links for Marissa's book and her Substack and everything else are all in the notes. Thanks so much. And here you go. All right, y'all. Well, this is an exciting week. It's sort of country week. I figured it's Halloween. Let's do something fun and special. And we are starting with the woman who, I don't know, in my estimation, in her very long career as a writer and a critic and a thought leader. I hate that term, but it's a thing about country music and women in country. I think has really illuminated a lot. She's started some chaos, good trouble in the country music scene, and has written a book. But I'm so obsessed with Her Country. We will get into it. But hello, Marissa Moss. Thank you for being here. I'm so excited. Hello.
Oh gosh, what an intro. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So I just gave a slight intro, but I really like letting my guests start out by just introducing themselves. So tell everybody, please, who are you and what do you do?
I'm a journalist, an author. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, but I'm originally from New York. So I came here as a little bit of an outsider about 13 years ago. And kind of immediately realized things were really weird in the country music industry. Weird is a very nice word. But yeah, I've been living here in Nashville and reporting on country music for about that, since I arrived here. And yeah, Her Country, my book about women in country music, came out, what was that, 3 years ago? Something like that. So yeah, still chasing that beat and trying to break some doors down, maybe get kicked out of some doors, etc. But that's fine.
That's awesome. So the book, I picked it up and I was like, well, this will be good. I'll read it. And I sort of, thought, well, I'll read it in slow chunks before the interview. And I started it like when I was getting into bed, and then I looked up and I had finished the book, and it was well after midnight. And I was like, what happened? I was so into it. And it even like provides this great soundtrack. Like I'd be reading and I'd be like, now I'll listen to Marin, now I'll listen to Nikki, because you provide this fantastic soundtrack for the book. But one of the things that you start with that just slaps me in the face pretty early on is when you say women are only played on the radio 10% of the time. And
Yeah,
I
and
was
that's a
like,
generous
what?
number. Yeah.
Yeah, so can you talk a little bit about like why you wrote this, that and like the story that you wanted to tell, and I know it's been a few years, and so sort of even your reflections on where that story is now.
Yeah, it's fun because I haven't talked about this book specifically in a little while, but I talk about this stuff all the time because not enough has changed um, at all. But yeah, when I moved to Nashville, I kind of immediately noticed something was amiss. Like I came to Nashville the year before I moved here. I dressed up as Loretta Lynn for Halloween. Like I was a weirdo in New York City, who was into country music, and I listened to a lot of women. And then I moved to Nashville, and I'm still, searching, listening for this music that I love, but realizing that none of it is actually getting played on country radio. And that seemed very strange to me because I grew up, I'm in my 40s. I don't know if a lot of you out there just watched the Lilith Fair documentary on Hulu, but it was so striking to me because a lot of what was going on then in the 90s is going on now in country
Mm-hmm.
music.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I set about, without kind of realizing it until I actually wrote the book, to tell the story of women country music that would not be represented on country radio.
Yeah.
Because country radio, if you look back in the history books or you look back on the charts, you're just going to see Lukes and Jasons and, all sorts of white guys of different, well, no, they're all about the same. And that's what you're going to see when you look at country radio, but that's not what history is telling us. And
Yeah.
there's also so many people that feel excluded from country music or don't feel represented in country music or feel like it's not a genre for them. Because in a lot
Mm-hmm.
of ways, if you only listen to what's on country radio, it's not. And I wanted to tell people there's this whole other world waiting for you that you can join, you can come into country music. There are people like you, there are people making music for you, there's space for you. It's not just that's not what country radio is telling you, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Yeah. So I'm curious because it's 2025. And, we listen to music on so many different things. I have Spotify behind this screen right now. How important is radio still in what gets played and what gets sold and who gets popular?
It's wild, right? To even like talk about radio as
Yeah.
being something that influential, as you said. Yeah, same thing. I have Apple Music, was just listening before we got on here. Country radio is all important in country music still.
Mhm. Okay.
And Nashville is very much a town of, the way that we've always done things is the way that we're always going to do things. Especially because the way that we've always done things have kept white men, especially in power. So why would anyone want to change that? Um, if it's working for them. And it's in it's extremely difficult to change that because everything is so symbiotic in Nashville. Country radio reflects on the labels and the label reflects on country radio and blah blah blah. It's just this cycle we cannot get out of. Until we do, nothing will, those meaningful changes that we all want to see will be very slow to happen, even in the age of TikTok and Spotify and all of that. Um, and I know it's very strange if you haven't
Yeah.
turned on radio in 20 years. You're like, why is this happening? But it's still, one of the main market drivers here in Nashville.
Yeah, on Friday I'll have the interview with Ali Colleen. And she was amazing. But one of the things that she mentioned was that country music fans are more opinionated and more conservative than most. And I have friends who work in the music industry, and I always say, like, the nonprofit industry is one of the worst in the world, but there's nothing worse than the music industry. And there's nothing worse than being a woman in the music industry. And I have a suspicion that that goes double for country music. And so I'm really curious with your thoughts on, is country music really that much worse or different or more conservative than even other genres within the music industry, and how much of that is because of the culture and place that country music comes from?
Yeah, I mean, the music industry is still, yeah, a pretty terrible place for women to exist in. Um, so a lot of the things that I say about country music could be applied far and wide. However, Nashville is very behind the times when it comes to, any kind of current trends we see in music or any kind of social movements we see in music, and very resistant to it. And not to get, too nerdy or whatever, but some of that can go to pointing to that prevalence of radio and how that, um, the connection to conservative talk radio, or the
Mm-hmm.
representatives, the amount of um, rural listeners that are represented in country music, blah, blah, blah. There's so many, there are many different reasons for it. Um, but it is very frustrating to see an industry that refuses to change with so much of its whole chest, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
um and so much of it is sort of packaged under this idea of upholding tradition and country music traditions and all these things that are, very sacred to the genre. um, but I don't see any point of upholding traditions if it's marginalized people. Why do you,
Right.
those aren't good traditions.
Yeah.
And Nashville also operates under this idea of the family. So you'll get told, if you come to Nashville as a musician, you come and you get told nonstop that country music is a family. Everybody looks out for each other, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes that's true. And there are really lovely ways that that manifests itself for songwriters. However, if you're not in the chosen group of people, if you're not part of the designated group by Music Row, this is very much a family that will kick you out of Thanksgiving dinner if you
Mm-hmm.
come with a different opinion than your Uncle Larry,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm always very wary of something, of a business that tries to pass itself off as a family
Yes.
environment anyway. And
Yeah.
that's very much what happens in Nashville. Is it's sort of like, we're this family, but really we're, of course, a a business under capitalism, and
Mm-hmm.
we're going to use that in insidious ways. So yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah. I think one of the things that's frustrating for me is how country music, well, I want to say not all country music, but how the sort of dominant country music that most people hear can play into stereotypes. So you talk about your friend's confusion when you moved from New York to Nashville. I moved from Massachusetts to Louisiana, and like the absolute panic of people, of
Yeah.
professors. I remember there were girls who were doing the Peace Corps and they were moving to like Rwanda or wherever, and people were like, oh, it's gonna be great. And then I would say Louisiana, and they'd be like, oh my God, you're gonna die. And I'd be like, I'm sure it's fine. And then I got down there and I was like, this is absolutely fine and lovely, and they have way better food than in Massachusetts. But what the perception is of people of the South doesn't fit what's true, but it fits the sort of the narrative and the branding. And now we're at a place where, I have to either check the politics of a country artist or really determinedly like not check the politics. Like, I was thrilled
Yeah.
when my friend was like, no, Miranda Lambert's like actually okay. Her brother's gay and she's totally cool. And I was like, thank God, because I can't live without Miranda Lambert, but I also don't want to Google. But there's this wave of awesome, progressive, queer, like amazing young country artists who are doing really cool music. Like I love Lily Rose, and you talk about I mean, even people who've made it, like Casey, obviously, who's very different. Or I just wrote this whole article about Dreamsicle because I'm obsessed with it. I think it's like the greatest single girl anthem album ever. I'm,
So good.
there are these mostly women who are doing this really great progressive music that I think could change both the perception of the South, but also really the politics of the South, and they're just not being heard enough. So I'm really curious on your thoughts on where that wave is, and if it's going, and if it's growing, and if you think they are going to get to a place where we start seeing, when we think of country music, we start thinking more of them and less of sort of the good old boys.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. And I think like what I tried to do in her country is set it in such a way that kind of mirrored what was going on in the culture at large. Especially because you live in the South um and you see this play out in elections, you see this play out in pop culture, this way of saying, some terrible, bill or law will come to pass, and people from the East Coast will say, well, everybody down there in the South deserved that anyway, that's how they voted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Obviously we know that's not true. It's not, that is
Yeah.
not representative of an entire place, and that is very much true with country music too. And I think people will look at this genre and dismiss it because of some of the loudest voices. If
Mm-hmm.
you look, if you go to country music and you just look at Jason Aldean, who, look, conservative people have a right to have music and have opinions. Um, how do I say this nicely? Well, I think the people that do that in country music don't also make great music. And
Mm-hmm.
they're
That's fair.
so um I know, at least have a banger if you're gonna, but like I could give some to Toby Keith. He has some bangers. But some of the loudest ones right now do not, and they get to
Yeah.
exist on sheer mediocrity, and that's very frustrating while also being racist, etc.
Mm.
But I feel like I'm going on a tangent. But anyway, back to, yes, like country music it's the genre of the working man. It's a genre of stories. It's supposed to be about the American struggle. So to think that it is just a genre about white dudes having parties and tailgates and boats is completely historically inaccurate anyway. Um, and there are people here, and have been people here, making incredible country music, um, that is progressive, that is, you know, all music is political, if you ask me
Mm.
anyway. But if you want to tag it with that is dealing, existing in a political space, reacting to the culture. Um, some of it is protest music. Some of it is just, singing about modern day struggles of womanhood or queerness or whatever that is. And that to me is some of the most interesting country music being made.
Yeah.
It helps us all deal with being human, see the human, you know, uh, seeing each other as humans, and which is a great function of music.
Yeah.
Um, so at the same time that I always feel very kind of pessimistic about certain parts of the genre, I feel very hopeful about other parts.
Mm-hmm.
As long as we're not talking about country radio, because then it's kind of all out the window. But, yeah.
Oh god.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think as far as too talking about sort of all parts, one of the things that you do in the book, but also in a lot of your writing, there's this viral thing that I just saw yesterday, and I was like, this is exactly on track, because you talk a lot about the history of Black music and Black influence in country music, and one of the artists that you focus on in the book is Mickey Guyton. And of course, everybody, I think, in the world sort of realized, oh, there's a real problem in country music when Beyonce was snubbed, and then she came out with the pettiest album of all time, which I think is hilarious. But then there's also just this moment that happened recently with Shabuzi, who I don't know if you saw this, but he was presenting an award at the American Music Awards with a young woman. I'm sure she's lovely. I do not know her name. But she was talking about, they were giving an award to a sort of white country artist, and she was saying that they had basically invented country music, and he sort of like rolled his eyes and scoffed. And it has led to this whole internet conversation about how the roots of Black music and country have really been ignored. You will be shocked to find or to hear that when I toured the Grand Ole Opry, I was the only Black person on the tour. Shocking, I know. And I remember like Darius Rucker was the only Black person on the wall, and I was like, Darius Rucker, like that's weird. Good for him, but didn't expect to see like Darius Rucker. I had to Google. I was like, why is Darius Rucker here? I didn't even know that he had like gone country.
Yeah, big country star.
But it's interesting because on the one hand, like because I feel like this all fits into, and it's frustrating to this typical Southern narrative that isn't true, because there are also a lot of like really great Black country artists who have actually found independent success, but again, you'll never hear them on the radio or see them on CMT or see them get awards. And then we don't even talk yet about like how much Mexican and Latino music has played into and influenced country music. And there's this whole other world of influence that has been ignored. And I'm just curious sort of on what your take is on where we are with that. Are we ever going to get to a place where the whole world of country influence is recognized?
Wow. Gosh. I don't know. It's tough. I mean, I remember that moment with Shabuzi. That was very funny. I can't even remember which country award show or what award show is what. I would probably mix them all up because they're mostly all identical and interchangeable. There's so much. I mean, there are people working so hard to correct the history books. They you have Black Opry out there taking country art, Black country artists, indigenous Mexican country artists on tour, um, trying to show that country artists and country music are just more than a bunch of white dudes in trucker hats. You have people out there like Mickey Guyton. You have so many Beyonce. You have people doing this work constantly and thoughtfully and in such an important way. At the same time, you have people, one, sort of countering them in constant whataboutism, questioning their motivations. Like, this is all constantly brushing, banging into each other nonstop. Um, I have hope that we'll reach a point not only where we've corrected the historical record, but opened up the definition of country music in a way that's not constantly questioning the bona fides or right to exist every time a person walks on stage who isn't white, which is what I feel like we do now, and we definitely do now. I don't even think I need to say I feel like it is happening. You can see it from Mickey Guyton's entire existence in Nashville. I mean, I remember when I was writing that book and I was talking to her and she was telling me about when she was going to radio tours and people were sort of constantly like shuffling her and be like, "Oh, are you, here for are you R&B?" Or people would listen to her music and classify it as R&B. And she'd be like, "This is country. Like, why are you?" She knew why, but like, you're putting me into this category that I am not in. I am a country artist, and so you're getting that pushback from so many different angles, and we still see it constantly now. Like, even pointing to the fight, and I believe that's in so many ways why Cowboy Carter is brilliant is because Beyonce confronted all of those assumptions head on.
Mm-hmm.
People really took, and sorry, I'm going on such a long tangent now, but
No,
I
it's
remember
fine.
when she came out and projected on the I think it was the Guggenheim, this is not a country album, this is a Beyonce album. And so many people took that in bad faith to be like, oh, Beyonce's saying this album isn't country. So we're not going to classify her as country anyway, which is such like a BS way
Yeah.
to approach that record. You're totally misunderstanding what she was trying to say, which is why would you try to classify your music into a genre that has historically excluded you, and not just historically excluded you, like literally made you feel like crap when you came to the CMA Awards to participate in the genre, you know? So anyway, I could go on
Yeah.
an hour long Beyonce rant, but I mean, that's a lot
Well,
of the
and I
work of
think,
that album.
it is, one of the things too that I think frustrates me about, for instance, like if you look at Mickey, who worked so hard and she has so many great songs. And then the song that finally was a hit was Black Like Me. And while it's a phenomenal song, I know what it's like. It's very difficult when you are Black, when you're female, whatever, to try to, so for instance, when I am writing for publications, they only ever want me to write about things about Black people. And it's like, but I want to write about other stuff, and for Mickey, I was like, it's so frustrating that when she finally has a hit, it's just because she's writing this song about Black pain, when she has a million songs that should have been hits that are just good country songs, but you're
Yeah.
not allowed to just have a good country song, right? And I feel like you saw that, and even like, I think when you talk about someone as big as Beyonce, it's like when Beyonce and Serena both almost died giving childbirth, and that was what made people pay attention to the Black maternal mortality crisis, because they were like, well, if they're gonna almost kill Serena and Beyonce, maybe it really is a problem, right? It's like, oh, if they're gonna be racist to Beyonce, maybe they're being racist to everybody else. And like, and I felt like the parallel of that, and then Beyonce having the power to be like, I'm gonna have Willie Nelson on this album, who you can't argue with, and poor Mickey only having a hit because it was about Black pain during 2020. That is just like, man, there are such like specific markers that you're only allowed to hit to be successful here. And otherwise, like, Mickey hasn't had I don't think, a hit since, right? It's like that one moment we'll give you, and then we're gonna keep dismissing you.
Oh yeah, yeah, 100%. I mean, I think the idea of like a country star, a woman, a Black woman country star in Nashville who is just existing as any other country star and making music is not something that Nashville could get its head around.
Yep.
And then so like Mickey has the, great songs. She's a country artist doing all the same work. And then once Black Like Me resonates with people, then you hear the same talk of like, oh, she's too political. Now she's just trying to like make her career on being political. It's like, well, no, she was here for 10 years prior to that. And
Yep.
that's why I chose to sort of frame the book the way that I did, with Mickey, Guyton, Casey Musgraves, and Maren Morris, who all came from, because I could have chosen from a lot of different women, and there are a lot of women worthy of writing about, but I very specifically wanted to talk about three women that came from Texas to Nashville all around the same time. So while talking about these very real challenges that women in country music obviously face, if you look at the same 10-year period, in that time, Maren Morris and Casey Musgraves were able to become bona fide stars.
Yep.
And it wasn't easy, and not through, especially in Casey's case, the traditional path of country music. Mickey's out there doing the same thing, and where does that get her in 10 years?
Yep.
She's doing the
Yep.
same, kind of route. So it's very frustrating, and you see it now. We just have, I think there's a great data I don't even know what to call her. She's like data queen, data Jada Watson, who crunches all the numbers on country radio. And I think the amount of Black women played on country radio was like 0.01 or 0.1 or something,
Mm-hmm.
just like statistically insignificant.
Yeah.
On the rate just kind of stunning.
I believe it. So this leads me to a question I've always had, because I'm also a huge fan of Southern rock. I'm obsessed with Larkin Poe. I'm devastated that Muddy Magnolias never came out with an album.
Oh, they were so good.
They were so good, right? And what happened? But one of the things
Yeah.
I've always wondered, listening to women in Southern rock, or there are sort of male Southern rock groups that are often led by Black artists, Black male artists, that I always wonder, did did they choose to go, because a lot of them also are based in Nashville, and I always think, like, did they choose to go the southern rock route because it allows them to bypass Music Row and have a career without having to fit into those strict country music rules? I What do you think that that's it? Do you think that the artists that are sort of country adjacent, but more, I think often it's more rock, sometimes more folk, that allows them to sort of skirt the country code a little bit?
I think just by the sheer fact of sort of not declaring yourself as country, um, means that, you're not going to get those opportunities in country music. But if you're self-aware enough to realize that those opportunities are not going to come to you anyway,
Yeah.
classifying your music as southern rock or Americana or folk or whatever that might be is a kind of a more direct way to get to your fan base. An interesting thing that gets to happen with a lot of white dudes that come to country music and form southern rock bands is that eventually, if country music decides that they're popular enough, then they'll decide that they're country and
Of
welcome them
course.
back in, which is always really funny. Or welcome them in,
Mm.
like, well, that band isn't country at all, but they wear flannels, so I guess you like them, which is fine. But it's always an interesting one. But I think a lot of folks in this town, and there's so much talent, are starting to figure out that it is just not even worth it anymore. It's
Yeah.
not even worth it
Yeah.
to try. And that is sad. It's sad because if it's your dream growing up, if you're Mickey Guyton listening to Leanne Rhymes and thinking that's your dream, you shouldn't have to say, actually, sorry, no, that's only for white people. Like, you can't
Yeah.
do this.
Yeah.
But there is also a lot of freedom in saying, fuck it, burn it down. It doesn't want you. We'll take your talent somewhere else. And
Yeah.
there's an incredible amount of talent that is going somewhere else that is not even, deciding to participate in country music culture anymore.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
just look at Dreamsicle. I think another thing that people grossly misunderstood when Maren Morris was talking about sort of quote unquote leaving country music, I don't think she was really even talking about the sound of her music necessarily. She was talking about not playing around with, not being completely beholden to the country music industry.
Hmm.
Um, because Dreamsicle sounds like a Maren Morris record. It's different than
Yeah.
her other albums, but it's also not in a lot of ways. Just a really great Maren
It's just
Morris
so
record.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, that album has been very underappreciated, but I'm glad that you love it. But
I know. I wrote a
yeah,
whole homage to it. I'm trying to get more people listening. But
good.
this also makes me wonder: is Music Rose sort of hoisting itself on its own petard? Because you've got, people like Marin leaving and Casey going pop, the Dixie Chicks, who, one of my very core musical memories is the first time I heard "There's Your Trouble." It's like, "There's Your
Ugh.
Trouble," "You Oughta Know," and "Smells Like Teen Spirit" are like my teenage, like, core musical memories. But, like, obviously their trials have been legendary, but now they're like won't even do PR in Nashville anymore. And you have like these huge, and I mean, we can, and maybe we'll have a whole conversation about Taylor Swift, but Taylor dealt with a lot in country and then she went pop, right? Like, all of the biggest artists, and arguably all of the biggest country or formerly country artists right now, are women, and they're all leaving country music. And it's mostly because of how Music Row decided to treat them. They're sort of doing it they're cutting off their noses to spite their face at this point, aren't they?
I think so. And I think if country music doesn't get its shit together, that it is not going to be a lasting genre. And I think we are so focused on what's working in this exact moment
Hmm.
that no one is looking towards the future. And and I always say, I'm like, look, I want people to make the right choices based on, moral clarity and like ethics and those crazy kinds of things. But if that's not going to motivate you, then maybe the bottom line will.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
country music is losing these women that are, insanely talented, kind of legacy, future legacy kind of stars um, and you're losing that money and that revenue and that luster because they're leaving the
Yep.
genre. Like, don't you want to hold them in the genre? Don't you
Right.
want them to come into country music and stay? Because now a man can, exist in country music, go make whatever he wants, come back, wheel, whatever, he can do whatever he wants. He can call himself a country artist and make music that doesn't even really sound country ever, and we'll just say it's country and it's fine.
Yep. Yep.
So he doesn't have to do any of those, jump through any of those hoops that women do. And I hope that at some point country music will come to its senses, even if it's just for, its own uh existence and future.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I'm always amazed by people who don't make the right choice for like the bottom line if nothing else. But you
Yeah.
talk about this double standard because I'm, I know that Natalie Maines has talked about how Johnny Cash became an absolute legend for singing I Shot a Man Just to Watch Him Die. But they got so much shit for Goodbye Earl, who I think objectively deserved to die, right? Or like you talk about Leanne Rimes versus Jason Aldean and the very different reactions and how her career was ended for doing something that was not nearly as egregious as Jason Aldean. And so, even in the music itself, and what is acceptable. It's like men, like outlaw country is a huge thing, but women are also always supposed to be good girls. And it's so remarkable how you really literally see that double standard in every single part of the industry.
Yeah, you could point to, you have an example for every scenario, really.
Mm,
And
mm,
Leanne Rimes is one that really gets me going, especially because she's a big part of her country, and I think just so undervalued and such a loss to the
yeah,
genre. Like,
yeah.
and I don't even think she's so chill. Like, she'll show up. She's in Nashville 911 now. She showed up, I think, the CMA Awards this last year, or maybe it was something else. I get them all confused, like I said. Um, she is just so incredibly talented, um, but was pushed out for, like, all these insane, very sexist reasons.
Hmm.
Same with the chicks. Like, they, like you said, they won't come to Nashville to do press. They want nothing to do with this town. They want nothing to do with country music. Of course, I do not blame them, but
Yeah,
what a loss. I mean, and not
right.
like, if you look at it, if you remove yourself from all this sort of controversy and everything that revolved around them as just pure musicians, and you go back and you listen to their music, they are incredible musicians, songwriters, singers. Like, they should be one of the foundational bands of this genre still. Like,
Yep.
imagine how good country music award shows would sound if we continually had them on, had them part of this genre, had them on the
Hmm.
radio.
Hmm.
um that's just such a loss. Like, it's crazy to me that no one is
Yeah.
sitting around. I think everyone is maybe secretly, like, says it, be like, man, I miss the chicks. Like, yeah, like, you should. They are
Hmm.
really amazing, one of the best country bands of all time, and we decided that they couldn't exist here anymore. That's insane. Like,
Yep.
it's
Yep.
insane.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I'm so to close out, I'm super super excited because you're working on a new book, yes, about female rock stars of the 90s. Say it's true.
I am. It's
So
true.
excited. Yay.
I am. You mentioned a little Alanis there earlier, so I'm thinking maybe you'll find uh find yourself in this book a little, I hope.
Oh, 100%. As soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, this is like these are the books for me. But yeah, that's I grew up with all of those women. And I'm so please, so tell us, I know you can't say a lot, but like, what are you thinking? What's the book? Like, perilous, whatever you want to say, I want to hear it. I'm so excited about this.
um well, no, I gotta, at some point, gotta figure out how to talk about it. That's the funny thing about these books. Like, you gotta
Yes.
figure out and talk about it. Oh, sorry, some music just started playing on my my thing. That's how it always
No
happens
worries.
around here. Just country music just pops up in the background. Um, but it's called, right now it's called "I've Been a Bad Bad Girl." We'll see if that title stays. And it's a kind of a first person reclamation of the women of 90s rock as told through my story. So that's a very, I gotta work on my elevator pitch, but it's a little bit of a hybrid musical memoir, I guess I would say.
Ooh, okay.
And the point of writing it that way is because I think I found that talking about how I have existed with that music has been what's, you know, really resonated with other women when I sit down to talk about this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, this is the real long story short, I guess, is that I got really sick of reading books by men where they got to tell us how they felt about music. And it felt like that space wasn't available to women to just
Yeah.
talk about how music made them feel, made us feel, how it influenced our lives, what our lives look like, what our girlhood, what our teenage years look like what that looked like.
Yeah.
And I feel like I read that all the time for men, and I didn't see a space for that for women. And there's an epilogue at the end of Her Country where I talk about in first person how the book was written and just kind of my story. It's just a couple pages. And a lot of women kept coming up to me at book events when I was on book tour saying, I really wish you had written the whole book that way. And at first I was like, should I be insulted? And I got a little defensive at first, not to them. It was very lovely. But then once I sort of got over myself, I was like, maybe it wouldn't have worked for this book because Her Country wasn't exactly about me, but then maybe they're right. Like,
Yeah.
why, or maybe we should be taking up more space with our opinions about shit and how it has impacted our lives. And that's kind of how I came to this next book that I really need to finish.
I know the feeling. No, I'm excited about that because I think particularly obviously for those of us who are millennials in our 40s, this will hit home. Even as you were talking, I was thinking about all these memories. Like the first time I heard Alanis when I was in junior high and I was at my friend's house and her sister was home from college and she had locked herself in a room and she was blasting Alanis because she'd just broken up with her boyfriend. And my friend and I were sitting in the hallway and we were just like, she is so cool, right? And I was like, that was like such, when you're like 12 and your friend's sister from college comes, it's like whatever she likes is the coolest. And thank God it was Alanis who is the coolest. But like there are so many girlhood memories that I feel like every once in a while you'll watch a show. Like I can't remember, there was a really, really good show that came out, I think on the CW a couple of years ago, and it was this murder mystery. And it was set in the 90s. And I'm like the whole soundtrack was the soundtrack of the 90s. And it was like, kids who were our age then. And I remember my friends and I were like, this is so awesome, but also we never see this. And so I'm really excited, especially because of how you wrote Her Country. Like, I know you're going to do a great job with this. No pressure. I know it's the worst when you're writing a book. People like talk about it. But we do, like, there are so many experiences, or like hearing the Chicks for the first time, whatever, it's so hard for me not to say the Dixie Chicks, but I will get there.
Sorry.
But I'm thrilled, but I'm also excited because I feel like we don't hear a lot of the backstory of these artists. Like I've been a bad girl, so I'm like, yeah, she's going to talk about Fiona and one of the greatest albums I think of all time. Who also, the first time I heard Billie Eilish, I was like, oh, Fiona Apple, like I get this. Like it feels very similar. But we don't talk about Fiona Apple enough, right? Like we don't talk about a lot of these artists enough and how extraordinary they are. And I still listen to them because that's the music of my, now I understand my mother, like still listening to the music of her day. But also I'm like, God, this woman was a genius. And she was in high school when she wrote this. And why are there not 12 documentaries and 8 books about what a friggin' genius Fiona Apple is? So I'm thrilled that you're gonna give them some voice because I think they deserve it. And it's at a time now when I think we are at an age where we can appreciate it, I think, more than we would have before.
Yeah, I think totally agree that there should be about, you walk into the music section at a bookstore and there, it's really hard to even find like a biography of a woman who's alive, especially. But there's a
Yeah.
million, like there's 10,000 on Pearl Jam, and that's great. I love Pearl Jam, but why do we not have 10,000 on Fiona Apple and Sheryl Crow and Alanis
Yep.
Morissette and
Yep.
Ani DeFranco and blah blah? I could go on. And I think another important part of this that I try to unpack through this book is like, not only was this the music that we loved, but simultaneously it was so kind of misrepresented and torn apart and tortured in the culture that we existed in. And what was that
Yes.
like to like constantly see these women dragged through the ringer and questioned
Mm-hmm.
and torn apart, and how did that shape us as women?
Yep.
And like, we all found our way back to it, even if we were told that this stuff was, if they were fakes or they were sluts or they were blah blah, or like just benefiting off men. Like, that was what we were constantly told, and most of us found our way back to it or never left it and figured out all of that bullshit. How did we get there? How did that impact
Yeah.
us? How do we all still end up, not all of us, but how do we all, how do we end up as feminists at the end of the day after that? And that's really interesting to me. And
And I've been thinking a lot lately, especially with The Last of a Showgirl coming out and the discourse around that, about how we haven't learned, right? Like, we've now seen what happened to Britney because of what we all collectively did to her, and mostly what her family and the industry did to her. And now we're seeing the results in like that man. I can't call him what I want to call him because I have to mark this explicit, right? Who like took money from her for decades and is now coming out with a book, and it's just like I every day I just like my heart goes out to Britney, but then I'm like, at the same time, like, we say we've learned, but we now are doing the same thing to Taylor Swift, right? Like, one day she's a slut, the next she's a trad wife. She can never just be like a person. And I'm like, we actually haven't learned. Like, we're actually still doing the same thing to women. And I think it might be valuable for us to go back to the 90s and be like, oh, right, remember when we all lived through that? Especially, I was just talking to an eating disorder coach, who's going to be a guest on the show, about how the rise in GLP-1s has led back to the rise of the 90s, early 2000s skinny culture, when you had like low-rise jeans and matching thongs, right? And like
mm-hmm.
what that's doing after the body positivity movement. And it's like, we haven't learned, and I'm so looking forward to having a deep dive into like, hey, you guys, remember what we did and that we all said we learned from this, and like, what we did to Britney? Like, maybe we should stop with this new generation of women. Maybe we should leave them alone or treat them like people, because we still are doing it to men, right? Like, how long did it
Mm-hmm.
take for us to figure out that Justin was the bad guy, And I'm really excited because I think we need a lot more deep dives, because we are still repeating that narrative over and over again when it comes to women.
Yeah, we definitely are. And that's something that I've been trying to do in this book too, is like constantly draw parallels to where we are now in different times. So it's very different from her country. That's very personal, but still like trying to link up the past and present and make everyone understand the ways that we haven't actually changed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and yeah, that is, you know, disheartening to say the least. Um,
Yes.
and I think that's when, like, to bring it back to country too, like where I do sometimes try to, sometimes I feel like I get very much positioned as like being the Debbie Downer person of the industry. Like, like if you want someone to say something, like to be the, yeah, to be the Debbie Downer of your piece, like I'll get called in for the quote. Um and that's also fine. Like, that's fine. I'm happy to call shit. If that's what you need from me. Um but there are moments, if you do look back at the 90s and you look at where we are now, there have been changes and strides made by women
Mhm.
in, especially in the pop space. And I don't really look at radio or anything like that, but I'm sure that women are doing fairly well on it when it comes to pop radio. Although I don't know, maybe not. Could be surprised. Um, and country is still so stuck in the past. So
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to look at both at the same time for sure.
All right. Well, to end on not a Debbie Downer note, I gotta ask, who are some of the artists you're listening to right now who you want more people to be listening to?
Oh my listen. Well, just before we hopped on, I was listening to Carter Faith, who has
So,
a new album out that came out on the same day as Life of a Showgirl. So,
oh no.
oh no, yeah. But I mean, who's competing with Taylor Swift anyway? I guess.
Yeah.
Really great, just like witty, thoughtful country record with this like kind of classic Dolly Parton like warble, but super funny and like I just really love that record. Um, what else have I been listening to lately? A lot of like great country records from women. No shocker there. Kelsey, Waldon, Caitlin Butts. I've been listening to a lot. There's just so much out there. Like
Yeah.
Kaylee, Hammack, just waiting. Jillian, Jacqueline just had a record out. Cam just had a record come out. Like it feels like there's just this endless well of incredible talent. It's just not what you would see on country radio or hear on country radio rather. But if you looked, it would just be white guys. So you can also look.
Don't go to your spot. If I go to I'm listening to someone I like, and then I'll go to the bottom where it says like listen, whatever, it would be like friends of this person. But then that's actually how I discover a lot of new artists. So for anyone watching, check out Carter Faith's album, and then just scroll down and you'll see some new people, and then just keep trying new people, and then that's how we'll discover people outside of radio.
Keep digging. I have a country newsletter called "Don't Rock the Inbox" with another writer, another excellent writer, a friend of mine, Natalie Weiner, and every Friday we put out we update our constant running playlist and we put out our picks of the week. But we also shit on stuff that we really don't like, and that is fun and important, and keeps the balance going.
Yes, I know. Yeah. We didn't talk about so much. This was so great. I will link for everyone. Don't Rock the Inbox. It's great. We didn't get to talk about it, but I'm going to link your amazing Rolling Stone piece because it was huge and important, and I think it's something people need to read. And thank you, Marissa. This was awesome. Hopefully you can come back on when the next book comes out. And I appreciate the work you're doing. I think it's really, really important. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. And likewise, I feel the exact same way about your work, and really happy to be here and talk to you and geek out too a little over country music, which is always fun.
Yes. Thanks for joining. I hope you enjoyed that amazing conversation with Marissa. Don't forget to click all the links. Share this episode with someone you think might enjoy it. And don't forget to come back on Friday for a special guest for Halloween. See you then.